Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. A very warm welcome here from Rotterdam, the Netherlands, for our third RailFreight webinar concerning the COVID-19 epidemic. At current moment, we are witnessing a pandemic situation, and of course, global impact on transport of goods is very high. Of RailFreight, we already had 2 previous webinars, and the situation is developing very rapidly at this point. So we think it's good to talk to you, talk to our readers. We see a lot of people from different countries already in the chat saying goodbye and hello from different countries. So hello to you as well. We've got a number of guests today. Unfortunately, none are here in the studio because of the situation, of course. But we'll make live connections with them and then we can talk to them. This webinar is held in cooperation with UIRR. It's the Industry Association of Combined Transport. So thank you for supporting this webinar. And we've got 4 guests. It's Akos Erzik from UIRR, Francesco Russo from HUPAC, Dennis de Roo from Van Dongen en de Roo, and finally Jackie Yan, we had previously already from the China Trans International, who can tell us a lot more about the situation in China. Our first guest is from UIR, Akos Erzik. Akos, good afternoon. Good to have you. So you are currently in Brussels, of course, where UIR is hosted. Can you tell us something about your current situation there? How's the situation in Belgium in general?
Well, the situation is a friendly lockdown, as the Prime Minister called it. People are allowed to leave their homes for grocery shopping, for basic needs, pharmacy, also to do some exercise outdoors. But we are warned to keep our distance from others.
Yeah, I understand. Well, in general, we hear a lot of course, it's a crisis situation, but we hear a lot of rail freight is a good modality at this point. It's a good option. Do you see that as well?
Indeed, rail freight, as far as crossing of borders or the ease of crossing of borders, these reintroduced internal borders of the Schengen area is operating rather smoothly. There were initially some problems. So we have heard of locomotive drivers who were put into quarantine on a border crossing freight train, but this was rapidly resolved. And since then, the traffic runs very smoothly in this sense.
Okay, and is this is for all countries in Europe? Because we saw countries are restricting border crossings at this point, but that for real, that's no problem?
Indeed. Well, for the moment, the railway crossing is running smoothly.
Okay.
I would say as usual. All those technicalities which caused some problems, some very limited cases, they were all resolved. And we feel the support of the authorities in allowing the smooth passage of trains across these internal borders within the EU.
Exactly, because of course what people are afraid of is the human interaction. Can you explain something where the human interaction occurs in rail freight transport and in an intermodal journey in general?
Yes, well, in intermodal, we can say that generally the level of human interaction is very low. So it would begin with a truck journey, typically collecting a laden loading unit. A loading unit that can be 20 foot, so half a truckload. So not only full truckloads, but partial truckloads are also possible. This is then collected by a truck, and the truck typically goes without stopping to the terminal because it's usually not a long distance, 50, 100 kilometers. At the terminal, the truck driver has to register the cargo. There we will hear Francesco from HUPAC, who have developed a very good protocol for the contactless terminal. So the drivers are lined up, but they are instructed, they're wearing their protective gear, they're lined up 2 meter separation. They do not come into physical contact with the administrators at the terminal, as they are protected by plexiglass. And so Then they are told where to drop their cargo. They go to a particular point in the terminal. Most often they just get out of the truck, release the pins on the trailer, and then the crane operator will lift the unit and put it on the train. Then they go to another location where they load up with a container that is ready to be removed from the terminal the same way, and then they are free to leave the terminal. So in this sense, there's very little interaction. Then the train leaves with the driver in the front, in the locomotive. At some borders, there may be a replacement of a driver, but then the train drivers interact. They say goodbye to each other, and the train continues its journey to another terminal where the very same thing happens as what I described earlier. So
yeah, okay. So there the level of intensity of human interaction and contact, physical contact, is very remote even.
Is very low, and also the distance that the people need to travel. So if you think about a freight train, an intermodal train can replace as many as 40, 45 trucks.
Okay. And you mentioned Jupak. We're going to talk to him in a little bit. But are they doing a better job than the market, or is this more something we see widespread and everybody's more or less doing the same thing?
Well, I would say that Hupak and the other operators of intermodal terminals in northern Italy started with these measures. By now, the best practice has spread, and so every terminal is now making introducing these measures.
Yeah.
To minimize the content.
I understand, because a question that comes to mind, and I see we got one from one of our viewers, is Casper Krak. He says, can you update impact to staff availability on the terminals allowing to pick up the containers? And I think that's a very relevant question, because if more and more countries are going into a lockdown or a friendly lockdown, like you mentioned it yourself, situation, what does that mean for availability of personnel?
Well, first, there's two types of personnel that we have to address. There are the critical colleagues at the terminal, the crane operators, the administrative staff, and so on. They are typically local or residents living nearby the terminals. They have no problems accessing their workplace. They're all instructed properly how to protect themselves, and they're attending to their jobs with a very high degree of responsibility and devotion. Regarding the local truckers, as I say, it's local. So again, it's typically truckers who are present in the country, living nearby, and these are day trucking assignments. So we have not been reported yet of any difficulties of collection or truckers to collect boxes from terminals and delivering them to their final.
Okay, well, that's positive news. Yeah, and another question that comes in, and then I'll go back to my questions I've prepared. But Chinesa Pascal, I hope I pronounced it right, is asking, can you tell about the situation in China? And later on we're going to talk to somebody in China, but perhaps you also have an update for the people.
Well, according to the information that we have, very limited information, I'm sure others have much better. The factories are starting up and they are beginning to fill containers, and these containers are finding their ways to the ports and ultimately getting on board vessels. The problem that we see is that in this regard is that the containers that are to arrive in March and April should have been loaded in January and February, and that was the period when the container lines did not function. There were a lot of cancelled circulations, and as such we're expecting a very significant fallback of number of containers at European terminals. We can say that the transcontinental rail route is functioning pretty good, according to reports, up to 90% of the volumes that were accustomed to last year. So there's a minimal reduction, But of course, that route is not comparable in volumes to the arrivals by seafaring vessels. So it will not make up, or it cannot compensate for the lack of inbound containers.
Okay, so the availability of equipment is becoming a problem, if I understand you correctly.
Well, the availability of equipment is another problem.
Okay.
This is for export relations, and the situation there is that the laden containers with export cargo are amassing in the port terminals, and there's a problem. There's a difficulty in finding intermediate storage until the container vessels arrive that will carry them onward to their destination.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in our viewers if they are witnessing the same, if they're having a problem with availability of equipment. So please let us know through the chat, or perhaps you have a good idea to confront this challenge. Please let us know also. And in general, do you think this is a time for RailFreight to pick its moment and grow, or is that a little bit too opportunistic from my side?
Well, I don't think it's about opportunity or competition or anything like this. We are serving the marketplace right now, and the entire logistics sector is making a huge effort to maintain the flow of goods to as high a level as possible. What is an opportunity for RailFreight, of course, is the high level of cancellations of passenger trains, because this frees up infrastructure capacity. Potentially, it will result in a sufficient number of locomotive drivers as well. So we don't have the two typical hindrances that we have normally when life is normal. Yeah. And for this reason, the performance level is pretty good.
Yeah, because if I can interrupt you, we get a question from Leo Ossewijzer. And he say we notice a lock driver shortage. Can we mobilize lock drivers from passenger trains to run freight trains? I think that's a very good question. How do you think?
Well, it's the bigger issue with this transfer is of course line knowledge.
Yes.
Or the locomotive driver needs to know the route that he's going to travel, and of course if there's no such line knowledge, it will not be possible for the passenger train driver to work on a freight train. But we are aware of railway undertakings making significant efforts to ensure that there's adequate number of locomotive drivers available for the freight trains.
Because there's no different license required for freight trains or passenger trains? Or?
No, in this sense, there's no difference. It's really the line knowledge, is the local knowledge of the route that the train needs to travel.
Okay, so perhaps that's a good alternative. And also, there are less passenger trains, so there should be more availability in the rail side. Huh?
Well, this is the headache right now that infrastructure managers are scrambling to resolve, to be a little bit creative, how to restructure train paths that have been originally allocated to periodically running passenger trains, and now there's a free capacity, and they can turn this or make this available for freight trains, and this is very important work, and I think it's experimental work. There's no procedure for this in the infrastructure managers.
Okay. So busy times at UIRR, I imagine?
Indeed, we are keeping close contact with the European Commission, as they are very helpful in operationally coordinating, collaborating infrastructure managers in several member states in order to ensure that there's a smooth flow of traffic. So we are grateful to the European Commission in this sense.
Okay, excellent. Well, we are grateful as well to you for participating in this webinar. You already mentioned your colleague at HUPAC, Francesco. I'm going to try and contact him right now and talk about the situation in Italy. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I'm just going to connect with Francesco right now to talk to him about the situation in Italy. which of course is one of the countries in Europe which has the most problem at this point with the coronavirus, although it's spreading, of course. But in Italy, we saw the highest number of contaminations at this point. Trying to connect Francesco. Francesco, I see you. Can you see me as well?
I see you.
Ah, great. And I can hear you also. Welcome to our webinar, our RailFreight webinar.
Thank you, Ari, for the invitation, for the organization, and for the opportunity, first of all, to share our experience. And thanks also to UIRR.
Yes, because you were already mentioned, but to start off, you are in Italy. Where are you in Italy, and how is your situation at this point?
Yeah, I would say Italy is suffering. A lot of people is losing the virus attacked not only the advanced but also the young people. Italy, fortunately, is also fighting, and the measures taken by the Italian government are rightly restrictive, but necessary, because this is the only weapon we have to fight the virus. That is to say, to stay at home.
Yeah, I understand.
I'd like to underline that the sector we are here to represent, and transport plays a vital role in the country in this moment.
Okay. A little technical question. Do you also have the webinar screen at this point? Perhaps you can close the webinar screen and only look at the Skype screen right now. It's no problem. But then the connection perhaps becomes a little bit better. Okay, so one of the questions we have for you, are you still here? Yeah. You are at the European Ground Zero, where UPAC has been battling with the coronavirus for a few weeks. What's the situation at the UPAC terminals?
Yes, we can say we can talk in this moment about a normal situation because we all are going through an extraordinary situation. I would say that the UPAC terminal in the north of Italy, I mean Gallarate, Busarsizio Gallarate Terminal, Novara, Piacenza, Pordenone, we are doing the best to ensure our services, operation, and also a certain quality of performance. The terminal are running with some difficulties, with some slowdown, but I would say that thanks to all the changes to the processes carried out and the extraordinary measures taken into action during the last week, we are making business go on.
Okay, so that's good to hear. So the more or less you are operational right now, and you say there are some difficulties. What is your main difficulty?
Yeah, because we have introduced some measures to make things go on. For example, most are focused on reducing the physical contact between people involved in terminal operation. Okay, as already Ecos was saying before, in general, in the intermodal, in the combined transportation, there is a low interaction between people. But anyway, in this situation, we have to be even more focused and try to reduce even more or eliminate where is possible. Otherwise, it's necessary to maintain the minimum distance recommended of 2 meters between people. For example, just to give you an example, when the drivers enters in the operation, we can't make them 50 people, 20 people, 30 people enter everybody as it was in a normal situation. So we can allow the entering of a maximum of 3 persons contemporary. And this means an increase in terms of waiting times. Okay, this is just an example.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, because I can imagine the processes of handling the containers on the terminals, of course, is very fixed process. And to make these changes and adjustments, is that easy at this point, or is that something you really have to go with the flow, or otherwise you can't operate at all?
I can say this is going now here at the terminal. Maybe even better that in our villages, for example, it seems and it sounds weird to share with you. Rules are easier to be respected here at the terminal than outside, because when people are at home, it seems that they want to come out just to have jogging, for example, to running, to make some physical activities or whatever. Here at the terminal, drivers are really aware of how important it is to respect the rules and to help us to protect all the people involved in the operation.
Okay, I understand. And does technology play a role in this point?
Technology is really very important. Digitalization offers enormous opportunities to enhance the competitiveness of intermodal transport in general. Okay. And during last years, HUPAC decided to equip its terminal with the so-called OCR system, so as to support automation of the check-in and check-out processes. Between 2018 and 2019, we have implemented this system here at the terminal Bustassizio Gallarate.
Okay.
And we plan to do it the same to the Antwerp and to the Singen terminal.
Okay.
We have moved ahead scheduling, and this technology is proving essential in terms of we can say contactless management, above all right now in this situation. Okay. If you want, I can explain just a little how it is an OCR system. Maybe I think that most of people knows.
Understand. Okay, so you're broadening this concept through the rest of Europe, as you mentioned. How do you see the situation developing in Europe the coming months, weeks, months? I don't know.
We are convinced and we really believe, so we are happy to take this opportunity to share with all these people involved, but not only the terminal, but all the operators have to be involved to face the situation in the supply chain, I mean, such as, for example, railway undertakings, the infrastructure managers, all the customers and the partners, because terminals are just a ring of the entire supply chain, and everyone in this situation has to do their part.
Yeah, I understand. We got a question from Milos. Is the only way to get cargo to Italy today in the current situation rail, or is there a possibility to go by truck or perhaps even air? You know?
When we talk about intermodal transport, we talk about the combination of road and rail. So it's impossible to make rail live without road. It's difficult. It's more difficult in this moment for road transportation because the shortage of drivers, because the block at the border and whatever. But there are. It's important that our sector in this moment is going to be helped by the government because we are playing really a vital role in sustaining the country in this moment. So we have the duty and the responsibility to make the maximum efforts to transport goods, above all the essential ones such as food, beverage, medicines, as well as all the needed equipment to face the emergency. Yeah. So for the moment, I see that we receive every day a lot of trucks coming by road.
Okay, well, that's a good sound, and I think I speak for a lot of people when I say transport of goods and in general are doing a very good job, because they're very challenging times, of course, and especially for the people in Europe and Italy. So thank you very much, Francesco. You already mentioned in Europe, Germany, Rotterdam. We're gonna talk now with our colleagues here in Rotterdam, from Dennis de Roo, from Dongen and de Roo, who is also working on the rail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to connect now with Dennis here in Rotterdam. I saw the image wasn't always correct, so perhaps this will be better. Let's see. Dennis, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, Dennis, you heard your previous speakers. Of course, we are also in Rotterdam, but from your perspective, from a RailFreight perspective, how are we doing?
From a RailFreight perspective, I think we're doing fine.
Okay. And the situation in Rotterdam?
Yeah, well, at the moment we are seeing a downward trend in volumes arriving from the Far East.
Okay.
Bookings, however, are picking up again, but yeah, well, the effect will be at least 3 to 4 weeks down the road before we will see something. Mm-hmm. This means that at least for the coming 3 to 4 weeks, we will see a decrease in volumes from the Far East coming in. So that will have an effect on my operation, and for certainly a negative one.
Yeah, so you expect the incoming goods, incoming number of containers to pick up in the coming period?
I think now in, let's say, 2 weeks, it will pick up again.
Okay.
However, our trains from and to Germany are of course also affected due to the reliance on these volumes between Europe and China. If we look at the train product from China, it's booming. We're seeing a lot of full loads which we can book, but also partial shipments or LCL is running smoothly at the moment via the train operation. But if we look at the sea side, we do see our problems also for our depots and also for our trains to other destinations.
Okay, because what is the biggest challenge you think at this point for you? Is it availability of equipment or?
Capacity in the end. This is also the case for our trains, which we run for Hannibal to and from Italy. They are completely full, but we are running into the fact that the capacity on the terminals in Italy it's limited. Okay. It's at a lower capacity than normal. So again, we do see some volumes picking up. We do see some volumes, especially in intermodal transportation within Europe. But we are also seeing the seaside, and the seaside, of course, affects also the land side.
Yeah. Yeah, because you had to reduce your personal level here in Rotterdam. You were one of the first to apply for labor hour reduction. Can you tell something about that? How are you managing to keep your company running with less people?
Yeah, well, the rule is to look into the future, as they say.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that we are dealing with China quite heavily, we already had a restricted view in things to come. In that sense, we already applied, I think, with the first 60 or 63 companies for the working time restriction, where you sort of send your people home and you get a compensation from the government. I think in Italy it's also already done, and some other regions it's the same.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And well, it's good, of course, and when we have such a big crisis like this, that the government works with the businesses to maintain the jobs.
That's a good thing. The problem we have is that we of course also have terminals and depots, and still the rent. It's called erfpacht in Dutch, but the rent still will go on at least. So that I need to pay. But for me, the staff and the labor, that it's a little bit compensated. It helps me a lot.
Yeah, because you mentioned the Port Authority, of course, which is the renter of a lot of the space. Is there contact with them, or are they?
Yeah, we are in contact with them, but they didn't say anything about what they can do or if they can do anything.
Okay.
We have to wait and see.
Yeah. Well, it's of course it's I think for a lot of Dutch companies, I don't know. It's coming for a couple of weeks now, but it feels like a surprise even so. So I think a lot of people are trying to find their way to deal with the crisis.
1 second.
Yeah.
Mace.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, but which routes specifically do you think are challenging at this point, and where is your biggest decrease visible?
The biggest decrease is the Far East to Europe and vice versa.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's at least 20 to 30%.
Okay. So, and what's your expectation for the future, for the upcoming period? Of say, you said that you think the volumes from the Far East will increase.
Yeah.
How do you see the situation in a couple of months?
I do see a positive view that it will pick up again.
Okay.
But again, we still need to see what the effect will be on the Europe side. We don't know yet. I think at least 2 to 3 months it will hurt our economy and the capacity which we have here in Europe.
Yeah. Okay. We have got another. We've got a question here from Kasper Koch. What's the equipment availability from the China rail operators at the moment? I don't know if you have an answer, but
from China, there is no problem.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is that the majority of the empty containers are going back to the Far East.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not loaded. This is also giving us a problem on the export side.
Yeah.
Because there is a lack of equipment. You see the rates going up quite heavily. It's double to triple the price, which is normally the case. So yeah. So equipment from China, that's not the problem. The problem is to China. That is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because you see the rates developing at the shortage of equipment, right?
Yeah, well, and of course the production companies or the companies who are selling their goods. Yeah, well, let's be honest, they didn't expect the price to go up. Let's say 2 to 3 times. So they didn't incorporate that in their selling price either. So that's giving a lot of problems.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Yeah, there was another question, but I don't know. Perhaps you have some experience, but has any European country suggested or implemented temperature checks at the border? I think for the train staff to check if they are healthy when they cross the border. Do you know anything about that, perhaps?
I'm sorry.
No.
No,
it's a difficult question. I understand. Well, let's hope for the best. And you already mentioned the Far East is developing in a positive way right now. I think it's a good point to go to China. We got our further guest Jackie there, so I will call him. Thank you, Dennis, for now.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
And now we will go to where, of course, the pandemic started, or where we first saw the big effects of it in China. And let's see if the communication goes smoothly. I see that we have a connection. Jackie, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Eric.
Hi, Jackie. Have you seen the rest of the webinar?
I have a very bad connection at the very beginning.
Okay.
But but for Danny's part, I think I get his points.
Okay. Yeah, because perhaps to start off, China, of course, a lot of people saw how it developed. The pandemic started there. How's the situation at this point? How's it now?
I think China is pretty much get back on track, except they use the pandemic center of Hubei province, and for the rest of China, we pretty much get on track.
Okay, that's good. Perhaps you have your webinar also still running. Perhaps you can close that on your computer, Jackie, because now we get a little bit of a ring. It's no problem, but okay. So you say it's getting better, the situation in China. Back to normal, or is that far too easy?
Sorry, I need.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I think we've got a good video connection for such a long way. So, can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yep.
Great, thanks. So how is the situation developing? Back to normal, or is that too easy?
I think it's almost back to normal. Although that people are still taking precautious measures like wearing masks everywhere. But I think we are on the way to get resuming the normalities. Yeah.
Okay. So no more lockdown situation?
Except Hubei. Yeah.
Okay.
The rest of China is almost back to normal.
Okay. So how do you see rail freight developing in China and also with Europe?
Sorry?
Can you hear me? Okay. I was asking you, how do you see rail freight developing through China and also on the Silk Road with Europe?
I think the railway from China to Europe is developing very well.
Okay.
The trains, all the westbound trains from China to Europe in March has been fully booked.
Okay.
So all the trains are fully loaded. It's quite difficult to get spare space for the westbound train, and even the beginning of April is also like almost fully booked.
Okay. So the factories are getting back on track and shipping their cargo again.
Yeah, yes, but now that what worries me is the situation in Europe. So, with more factories, with the lockdown, and with more factories get closed, and I think the demand to import material from China will be less. So it starts impact the volume from China, export volume from China to Europe right now.
Ah, okay.
We got some cancelled orders already.
Mm-hmm. Because do you still have your webinar also running? Because I hear a little bit of a ring in the
Yes.
in the conversation.
Give me one moment.
Yeah, no problem. It gives us a good time to talk to our viewers, of course, who are here, and I see your questions coming in. So thank you very much. Please keep on sending your questions. We do not get this opportunity to talk to China rail freight every day. One of the questions is, which is coming in is, when do Wuhan train get started again? And also, yeah.
Very, very interesting question. Actually, I just get the latest news that the Wuhan trains will be up and running. The first train will be next week.
Next week. Okay, so that's a bit of news right here. And that will be on a weekly basis, or do we know anything about the frequency?
The frequency is not known yet.
Okay.
So I will try to get the latest information and share it out.
Okay. Yeah, because you mentioned this, but Casper is asking, can you share your insight from China to Europe since customers are canceling due to European factories that are closing down?
Yeah, I believe so. These orders get cancelled because factories get closed down, and also people are worrying about nobody's going to receive this cargo when it arrives at Europe.
Yeah. So first China was down, but now it's back up, and now Europe goes down and China goes back up.
Yes, this is like a kind of like very bad cycle.
Yeah. So Stefan Breitenbach is asking, how about production in general? Is that back to normal as well?
I would say that 80% of the capacity has been resumed for the production in China.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's quite the number. Casper Brinskens is asking, are all types of westbound cargo, including electronics, IT, and consumer goods, picking up? And if so, does that imply that manufacturing capacities are recovering or that buffer stock is being run down?
I would say that the production is I'll say is recovering. Let's say 80% of the capacity.
Okay. Okay. And Ilyas is asking, in the conclusions, can we get some recommendations from UIRR, RailFreight, on strategies for attracting freight to rail transport from other transport models in this very specific content? Well, that's of course a question for UIRR, but perhaps you have some ideas about it as well?
So sorry, can you paraphrase the question again?
Yeah, paraphrasing the question, it's what are some good strategies for attracting rail freight to or freight to rail? And I think more in specific, I see the Silk Road has developed in the last couple of years very rapidly, and now we see the Silk Road volumes are picking up as well. Are those companies benefiting from shifting to the rail freight and the Silk Road?
Yeah, definitely. I think in the past months, I think rail freight has proved to be one of the most reliable, I'll say, modalities in the past months. I mean, during these difficult times, as you can see that with the reduction, with the cancellation of the flights, and also with the more, how say, blank sailings from the shipping line companies. I think the rail freight definitely, I'll say, helped a lot. I mean, to export some necessary necessities materials to Europe.
Okay.
And this product has been, I'll say, let's say, to some extent subsidized by the Chinese government. I mean, I do believe that concerning factories in Europe, I think benefit somehow from this kind of product.
Okay. So, and then after the crisis will be over, in a couple of months, hopefully, what do you think? Will people say, "Wow, rail really paid off on rail freight, and we'll see a big increase on the Silk Road," or do you think this is nothing to do with that?
I think what affects the supply chain now is that because due to these coronavirus factors, the supply chain has been disrupted totally. So I do believe that with the recovery of the factories in Europe, so I think there will be stronger demand on rail freight, because with the disruption, people cannot foresee, cannot plan their supply chain very well. There will be some, how say, emergency, say some urgent shipments always. They will have to unfortunately choose to air freight or rail freight to expedite their transportation instead of using the ocean freight.
Okay. And we had a question from Mayuri. She asked, how does the situation in China differ from that in Europe? I think, and more, perhaps she means from how are we handling the situation in comparison with China? Do you know?
I think Europe right now is kind of mimic the situation about 2 months ago in China. So let's say the pandemic started from Hubei province. Hubei used to be the pandemic center in China. Let's say we take China as geographically, we take China as the European Union, right? So Hubei is like the situation now that in Italy. So so now that it spreads over the whole Europe, so we European countries are taking very similar measures to cross the borders, but not as extreme as what we did in China, because we have totally knocked down for the Wuhan city, but still that I think not to that extreme, I would say, extent, but we are taking similar approach.
Okay. Well, we got a number of questions, and thank you for your questions, our viewers. Send them in, and we will talk about them. I've got a question here from Chitra, and she asked, "What about transport on the middle corridor? How do you see that?"
Actually, the mid corridor is up running, but not on regular basis. The mid corridor, we define it, is from from Turkey, is from China to Kazakhstan and then to Aktau, and by Caspian Sea to Baku, and then to Duisburg, and to Istanbul, and then to Europe. This is the mid corridor. Actually, we have sent some test trains already. And the Xi'an is trying to have a regular service like twice per month from Xi'an to Istanbul, but there is kind of like a weak demand from the market because the transit time saving for the rail freight compared with the ocean freight is not much. So it's like almost the same. So people are not buying this value about like saving of transit time. So they feel that we need some time to build up this, to shorten the transit time by the mid corridor, so that it can be create value to for the customers.
Yeah, so it is available, but it takes a long time, so there's limited advantage to using it.
Yep, yeah.
Okay, another question from Thomas. Can we expect more trains since there's such a huge demand? All trains are overbooked, so can we expect additional trains, extra trains?
I think China has already the head office of China Railways has already approved like more capacity as of the beginning of April. But what I can see that the situation, the capacity, the bottleneck for the capacity issue has been resolved. But on the other hand, we also get some canceled orders from the European side. What worries me is that we put in more capacity, but on the other hand, we got reduced the demand from the European side. Yeah. So this is always a
disbalance, actually.
Yeah, this is a disbalance.
Yeah. Okay, so and another question from Caspar Briskens. He's asking, is China likely to increase subsidies to provinces to co-finance overland rail shuttles to jumpstart the industry? So is there any plan to increase subsidies for rail freight in China?
You mean the inland trains?
Overland rail shuttles, yeah. I think inland, yes.
I think China is the inland, the overland, the domestic train, the inland train in China is quite much also market driven. Is already quite a market-driven product. It's a mature product. I don't think China is ready to put in more subsidy to reduce the cost. To reduce the rates. There is no such kind of necessity actually. For some certain routes, actually you can apply. Actually, the train operator can apply for some kind of like cost. Apply for price reduction. Some discounts for certain routes, as long as you can, so you have some reasons to justify for it. Let's say if this kind of volume can help balance the flows,
Yeah, I understand. All right, Jackie. Well, we're coming to the end of this webinar. Do you have any last remarks from the China perspective, or more rail freight perspective, for us?
Yeah, my final remark is that, so my first-hand experience is that, still combined transportation is proved to be one of the most reliable transportation solution for customers, especially under this difficult situation. So, inter-country activities minimized. So we will keep, we appreciate the truck drivers and who is still up running, doing their job. So to keep all these things running. And my last comment is that I do hope that our European friends can take precautions measures and take good care, and hope that the things can be under control very soon. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I totally agree. I think rail is developing quite nice, and I think it's proven to be a reliable modality in combined transport in general. Thank you. You also stay safe in China, and let's keep in contact.
Yeah, thank you very much for calling.
Thank you. Bye. All right, viewers, thank you. So we come to an end of this webinar, but not without thanking our partner UIRR, which has helped us with setting up this webinar for our RailFreight readers and viewers, of course. Thank you also to our guests from UIRR and also from UPAC, from Dong and de Roo, and China Trans International. And thank you, of course, for watching. Perhaps you have a question which has not been heard yet, or you think, wow, how can I get an answer to that? Please send them to us, and we'll put them on our blog, put them on our website, and try to find the answers. Of course, the current situation is developing very rapidly at this point, and we are at the moment very curious how the future will be in Europe. For now, we can say stay safe, and let's keep rail freight moving. Please, thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye.